So Julie and Dan, I already mentioned your titles, and we're going to talk, in a minute about what each of your organizations does or is known for. But Julie, maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us how you got into this business, and Dan, if you could then do the same.
Absolutely. So I have graduated from State University and really loved Manhattan, so I had to stick around. My background before this is banking and real estate, but I got my first job with the foundation working for our gift planning department as an assistant. Worked my way around helping our colleges, and then fell in love with prospect management and prospect research back in 2006, and I've been here ever since. And I will tell you, for working at the same place for nearly 16 years, as anybody in our industry knows, it's a totally different world, and it's just so exciting to see all the great evolution and change that we've been a part of.
That's awesome. Dan, how about you? How'd you get into this crazy business?
Yeah, so Dan Stevens here, co-founder of Windfall. My background is mostly in sort of B2B data companies broadly, first as an investor, and then sort of in the for-profit space at a couple of different data-related startups. We started Windfall about 4 years ago with the realization that none of the legacy data vendors out there had really any accurate assessment of wealth on the very high end. And we'll get into a little bit more about our methodology, but effectively what Windfall provides to the nonprofit market today is more granular, accurate household level wealth data focused on the affluent population, as well as propensity modeling solutions, working with over 500 nonprofits broadly, and this focus for this conversation specifically on higher ed. So excited to chat through what we're seeing out there in the market today from a data and market performance standpoint.
Awesome. And I'm Mike. I bring almost no expertise to the table, so that's why Julie and Dan are here. But I've been doing advancement for about 10 years. I got my start at Phillips Exeter Academy, which is a prep school here in New Hampshire where I live and work from, and just fell in love with the fact that y'all who are on the call, you're changing lives by supporting higher ed, by supporting K through 12 institutions, getting kids scholarships and giving them access to education. So thank you for the great work that you do. Kansas State University Foundation is an ever true customer. And also, I think, Julie, the only university foundation that was a certified great place to work last year. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're definitely proud of that fact. It's an awesome place to work, not just great.
Better than great. Tell us a little bit about the foundation, your goals, and how you guys operate.
Absolutely. So we have around 42 frontline officers right now. So the way we are set up, we have a development division, which includes the officers directly, as well as my team, prospect analytics and research. And then our stewardship and events group is in there, as well as an annual fund. So we work together very closely, not only as a division, but also with our communications department as well. Overall, we have about 130 employees. We're all working virtually right now. And like many of the rest of us, it doesn't come without some challenges, but couldn't be prouder of our organization for pulling together and everybody for helping out. It's been as seamless as it could possibly be for us. And while we navigate the unknown, we are excited for all we'll learn and be better as we come out of this together.
Yeah, I mean, I think eventually we're going to get to the point in this where we can start talking about like how advancement has changed permanently, for the better. Like, do we do more video stuff like this? Are we talking to each other, between teams in new and different ways and working together because we had to when we were all remote, but then how does that translate, to the future? So it's going to be exciting. And Dan, you told us a little bit about Windfall, but tell us a little bit more. We announced a public partnership with you guys in the fall. Have really admired your organization for a long time now, and are super excited to be working together to deliver continually fresh wealth insights and engagement data on constituents.
Yeah. So thanks for that intro there, Mike. So we, again, we're focused on the high net worth population, which at Windfall we define as those with $1 million or more of net worth. So today in our data set, we maintain a model on around 15 million US households that sort of meet that minimum criteria. And we model to a very specific net worth figure. So we get as granular as saying John Smith is worth 1.2 million, Jane Doe is worth 42.5, and update those figures on a weekly basis. So some of the sources that we feed into our models you see over here on the right side of the page, a lot of those things do change with frequency. A lot of them maybe don't change, and I think we'll get into a discussion of that as we talk about where the market's been over the last few weeks. But the idea is that this is sort of a living and breathing data set. As changes happen in the stock market and the composition of people's wealth, composition of their families, we're constantly updating this model to provide the latest and greatest data to nonprofits broadly and specifically fundraisers and prospect researchers. So we track roughly 2/3 of the personal wealth in the US, again, work with over 500 nonprofits, and in addition to net worth, have around 30 other attributes that folks can use to sort of more efficiently prioritize and segment their constituent bases. And through that integration and partnership with Evertrue, we've sort of made the access to this data fairly seamless within the Evertrue tool. So excited to work on some mutual customers here in the higher ed space and make this data easily accessible for frontline fundraisers.
Awesome. We're really, I mean, we love what you do and we're excited to be working with you. I think most of the folks on the call are somewhat familiar with Evertrue. We specialize in partnering with higher ed and K through 12 organizations. Been doing that for almost 10 years now. Folks love us. We do have 5-star reviews, which is really, really exciting. And what we do is we take your data and we connect that with your donor's digital footprint. So whether it's their net worth through sources like Windfall, excuse me, whether it's through digital engagement from Facebook or dozens of other integrations, we bring that all into one place so that you get the complete picture of who your constituents are today, how they're engaging with you, and how you can approach them with annual major gifts or leadership giving asks. So we're excited to be working with everyone here on the call. I did put everyone's email address up there, so add us on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, get in touch. I see some questions, you know, is this being recorded? We will definitely send out the link after the fact, but hey, we're all here to help each other. So please feel free to reach out. We're gonna start talking about the markets, and we're gonna talk about, you know, what we can be doing as advancement professionals right now. But first off, quick poll for you. You're gonna see a poll on your screen right now, just about your projections. This is just something to kind of set the baseline and figure out like what everyone's doing right now. And so, you know, are you changing your goals and projections for fiscal year 20? So for this current fiscal year, you know, are you changing those goals? Are you kind of taking a wait and see approach? What are you doing right now? And we'll give you guys just a few more seconds to answer this. See a lot of votes coming in. And it looks like folks are still answering, but about half or the majority are waiting and see what happens, and others are remaining the same. So I'm going to give everybody just another second. Hit that button. There we go. Let me share those results. So you can see on your screen, actually, let me know in the chat, make sure that you see on the screen. Oh, I hear one organization, Sarah, I'm going to give you a shout out. Salisbury University met fiscal year 2020 goal in January. Well done. That's awesome. Very, very cool. So for the rest of us, we're taking a look at there. I mean, like still waiting and seeing what happens. You know, a handful of organizations are starting to reduce goals. Julie, what does that look like at Kansas State? How are you approaching the last quarter of the fiscal year?
We are actually just getting ready to figure that out. We have a couple of different ideas in mind about prorating or offering some new ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to help our officers meet their goals. Overall, for our organization, we're still hopeful that we're going to hit our gift production goal. Just going to be a little bit more creative and might take a little bit more time for us to get there.
And is gift production bottom line dollars in, or is that number of gifts secured or both?
It's the overall gift production would be the dollars bottom line. We also have a number of donors goal to try to grow our baseline of donors, but I think we may fall a little short. We're still working on those projections.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time in all fundraising venues that are, just following a little bit about political fundraising, this morning, and like everybody's on hold right now. Political, nonprofit, higher ed is kind of taking, I think, right now a wait and see approach, and we'll see what happens going forward. And a lot of that has to do with donors just either feeling unsettled or insecure about the economy and the stock market. And so that's where, Dan, you guys are the experts in tracking net worth and tracking wealth, and with the stock market, bouncing up and down. It was up 27,000, dropped down to like 17, kind of back up, kind of back down, kind of back up, kind of back down. How does this impact the wealthiest of our donors, Dan?
Yeah, so, sort of in prep for this question, I did a little bit of research here. It was sort of interesting to find that, during sort of the last major economic downturn in 2008, total US giving was down by 6 to 8%, depending on what source you look at. So much more muted than sort of the overall market. So I think, that is encouraging in sort of projecting donations. The other thing was that donor participation rates actually did not decline during that period. So, I think there are a number of studies out there, but one from the University of Chicago that really points to donations being much more responsive to stock market booms than busts. So, of course, different factors in every recession, and so a little bit harder to predict what happens here. But looking at some of that historical data, I think is fairly encouraging. But there's a very different story when you look at wealth, and I can hold off on that for a moment here, if Julie had any reactions, or anyone else has seen changes in giving that are a little bit more muted during downturns.
Yeah, I agree with the assessment from 08 and 09, but definitely this is a little bit more uncharted, just with the health on top of the wealth conversations than scares right now. We have seen things slow for a while, but understandably. And I was perusing some contact reports this morning and have lots and lots of conversations, it seems, saying we want to wait for the market, we want to ride this out. That doesn't mean everybody by any means, but lots of fear out there, I think, from our donors.
Yeah, and I see a couple questions coming in with, activity, soft ask shifting from specific projects to emergency fundraising. I think we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but we're gonna get to those questions in just a bit. But so Dan, yeah, how does the market fluctuations affect people's wealth?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to look at this. I think, the first is there are some downstream effects that will take, 3, 6, 9 months to really show up in any of the sources or modeling that we're doing. And really, when you're looking at a household's balance sheet, it's going to take some time for those downstream effects to hit. So a couple examples would be real estate. It's going to be a few months before we start to see sort of any softening in the real estate market, which obviously is a big indicator in looking at wealth. The other thing will be business ownership, right? We look at, we have a pretty unique lens into small business ownership and how that affects personal net worth. I think there's still a lot of questions out there with sort of how the small business market overall is going to be affected by this downturn, right? Like, are some of the stimulus packages involved with the CARES Act enough to keep payroll going for 8 weeks for certain small businesses and nonprofits as well? Is that going to allow us to sort of get through this, at least shorter term effect for small businesses? But then, of course, there's the component of wealth that has to do with what's in the stock market today. And really, our focus at Windfall is on sort of the affluent. So if you talk about the top 10% of wealthy households in the US, they own something like 85% of stocks broadly. So they are most affected by this 20, 30% downtick in sort of the broad markets here. So, how does Windfall address that? I think one of the the advantages to our model that gets updated on a weekly basis is we actually do take into account sort of those day-to-day market fluctuations. So there are some, heuristics out there that Arup, our CEO, wrote about last week that sort of show, based on the survey of consumer finances that the Fed conducts, how much of a given household's portfolios is in stocks versus bonds and other asset classes. So we do take that into account in looking at this high net worth population. Our initial sort of reaction to the market, we saw around a 6% decline in affluent households in our data set overall. And that was sort of from week one. So, significant, but not, down as far as the stock market has gone.
Yeah, I mean, is it safe I mean, I'm no financial expert. So, so the top 10% of wealthy people in the US own 85% of stocks. But that's not the only thing that they have that's making them wealthy, correct? So like with a diverse portfolio, yes, they're impacted, but they're also, they have other holdings that allow them to kind of maintain their top 10% status.
Exactly right. Yeah, and it of course also depends on the composition of their investment portfolio, right? Do they have mutual funds that are sort of tracking the broad market, or are they lucky enough to be an executive at Zoom or something whose stock is up, I don't know how many percent, but it seems like the whole world is on Zoom today, and Slack and other stocks, right? So it's a bit dependent not only on composition of asset classes, but then what is the stock portfolio actually comprised of?
Yeah, I mean, and just thinking about like the areas that are exploding, Zoom, Citrix, Slack, companies like that. Even Walmart is hiring right now, Instacart, organizations like that. Like, it's worth looking into your database right now and seeing what alumni and parents do you have working at those companies or in high level of those companies, because they could be coming out at a pretty good upswing based on the market alone. We didn't prep this question. I'm just going to throw it at you, and I hope that's okay. How about the folks that aren't in the top 10% of wealth, but sort of like the mid-tier wealth? Are they seeing dramatic effects? Is this a time to try to build out kind of mid-pyramid, leadership giving type programs? Dan and Julie, I'll ask you both in that order, and I'm sorry for throwing you a curveball.
Yeah, so I think again, not really our focus. So we're really centered in on all of our modeling on this top 10%. So I don't necessarily have a view there, but defer to Julie on that one.
Yeah, when I mentioned the fear that I'm reading about in the contact reports, I think just like in the summer of 08, fall of 08, there was that initial fear. I think it's not going to be a long-term issue with our mid-level or our top-level donors. People give from assets and people give from income. And there are absolutely, people who are worried about both, but there are also, to your point earlier, Dan and Mike, there are people who are well diversified or in markets that are luckily seeing that uptick. And so I think it is a great time to focus on the mid-level. The annual fund is absolutely doing a great job across universities and other nonprofits at really trying to target the emergency funds that can make a difference today. And I think through ongoing conversations with that top of the pyramid about why an investment is still a sound thing and how it's going to help our future, I think we're going to see a better response than what we're seeing in this very moment today if we look out long term, the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, I think the actions that teams take today are really going to build that result in the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, fundraising, we're in the relationship business, right? And so it's always about coming at all of these conversations with the long term in mind. And so if we as organizations are able to do a lot of connecting, and we're going to talk about gift officer activity and team activity in just a minute, but the more active we are and the more stewardship and just checking in we're doing right now and donors of all level, the more we're going to see results in the future. Dan, you mentioned small business ownership and entrepreneurship. This can be a tough time for startups like us. It can be a tough time for small organizations. But yet you guys track that really well. as a key component to net worth? What are you seeing in those fields?
Yeah, so I think it's a little early to tell. I think there are some encouraging, small business focused initiatives that were a part of the CARES Act that was passed last week that I think could alleviate the short-term pain. So alluded to this a little bit earlier, but specifically the payroll protection program, which is for organizations with less than 500 employees. So it could be nonprofits, SMBs. There are some nuanced rules to whether startups apply to this program or not. Most people are thinking no. However, this effectively could be up to a $10 million loan from the SBA for each of these companies that can be used towards supporting payroll, rent, and other operating sort of utilities over an 8-week period. The applications for these loans have not been opened up yet, so it's a little bit opaque as to exactly how they'll be funded. But if we're quickly putting 2.5 months of payroll into the hands of small businesses, and assuming the curve is flattened and we're coming out of this here in a shorter term, I think that, yeah, exactly. I think that positions smaller businesses and nonprofits well for recovery there. And then, from the lens of sort of Silicon Valley venture-backed startups, I think what we're hearing there is almost certainly slowing in sort of the funding markets, both in terms of, deal activity, but then also the, just sort of the valuations and everything coming way, way down already. So for companies that are sort of in weaker balance sheet positions, we're expecting a pretty tough time going forward.
No, that makes sense. So be real sensitive with your alums, your donors who are in that world, whether on the VC side or whether they're on the leadership side in growing a brand new business. What kind of changes, Julie, have you put in place to sort of address this? How has your team sort of shifted not only its physical working space, but shifted it in its day-to-day approach?
Well, we are the data people. So we've been quite busy trying to pull together data to create baselines so that we can have benchmarks to measure against for both how are we going to end this year in goals, but also how are we going to set goals for next year. So there's that piece of it. From a research side, absolutely taking a look at who it is we can have conversations with. We've been encouraging, along with our stewardship department, they've been doing an amazing job of being resources at how to reach out to people. How can you check in, say thank you? What are some creative ways to do that? What are some things we can do to show how much we care and appreciate our donors? I think that's been a really helpful approach for our officers too, who are, maybe a little leery to reach out and say, so how about that gift we were talking about? This is a good way to start that conversation, and then let it go into that major gift follow-up piece once they're okay, right? So our work's been very much heavy on the prospecting side of things and helping focus on that stewardship piece as well.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Start with the human element, like how are you doing? How's your family? How are your loved ones? And then move into, hey, we talked about this in the past. What are you thinking? And let the donor guide those conversations. But still talking to potential prospects and donors. And so I just wanted to toss out another poll question for folks. And, in this brand new world that we're in, where we're on Zoom all the time and Zoom stock's doing well, want to see, how is your organization addressing virtual visits? And so I'm going to launch a poll here. Is this new way of interacting with prospects something that you're just adding now, just starting to count now? Is it something you've already been doing? And is it something that you haven't considered adding yet? And then Julie, while folks are answering this poll, I know that y'all have shifted into counting all, and I can't say this word, substantive conversations.
You did it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So how have you made that shift to counting quote unquote virtual visits?
Yeah, so twofold. We are creating our own contact type for a virtual meeting, a virtual visit, because in the past those have been recorded by email or however people wanted to record them really. But that will allow us to really take a look at how many FaceTime, Zooms, GoToMeetings, Teams, all those platforms that we're actually utilizing to talk virtually with the donors. In addition to being able to report on that cleanly, like you said, Mike, we're using substantive contacts. So for now, that can be mail, phone, email. We've actually used them with our corporations and foundations team for a few years, and our digital development officers use them as well. And basically, we define substantive as a two-way conversation that's about a gift or about a potential gift. So it's whether we're qualifying an interest, we're cultivating, soliciting, stewarding, any of those things that is substantive. And that will probably play into how we measure for the year-end goal at K-State.
Do you think this is something you're going to continue moving forward, or once we can get back on the road, or is that going to shift back to let's get knee to knee, I think, as Eric on your team likes to say?
Yeah, obviously to be determined, but I think there's absolutely value in knowing what's substantive. So my team already tracks contact trends to say, are we up or down on phone calls and emails, and why? Because if we don't have outreach, if we're not recording things, it's a whole host of the air traffic control that we are. But I would say I hope that it stays, that we're able to capture it easily and find value in what's just a general outreach and what's that actual meaningful conversation that's happening.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, I'm completely biased because I work from home half the time anyway. And so I am virtually visiting all the time. And so I do hope this is one of those trends that stays. And it looks like, I'm sharing poll results here. Just over half of people responding said they just started counting them now. That's awesome that you're counting them. For those of you, the 1/3 who was already counting them, feel free to let us know in the chat who you are. I think that's really interesting. And maybe there's some ways that we can network and connect with each other and learn from each other there. I'm going to launch another poll, and then I don't know if I'm supposed to do this or not, but I'm going to do it because I have the microphone. Evertrue, if you're a customer of Evertrue, you're going to see us rolling out virtual visits as an interaction type, as well as the ability to log those in your relationship management platform as early as this week. Our product team has really been working hard to build in that feature. We've got some really cool things coming. So stay tuned. I don't know if I'm supposed to share, but hey, Brett's sick. He let me do this, so it's okay. We're also preaching, activity. Like, now is the time it doesn't mean necessarily solicitation all the time, right? Solicitation if the donor is ready or if they want to continue moving that forward. But this is a great time to take the opportunity when we're all at home to pick up the phone, shoot a text, create a video, get on a video call, send somebody an email, and touch base with every assigned portfolioed prospect. And so, in the last couple of weeks, when we've all been sheltering in place, how has gift officer activity changed? And, Julie, what are you seeing from your team?
I would say the first week that we went virtual, we had our team settling in, right? Getting their
Totally
computers
fair.
up, finding that space. So our first week, we were a little bit down in activity, but that's to be expected. Last week was our second week. And we absolutely had a spike, not only in the outreach to our donors and prospects, but also in portfolio cleanup. So there's no reason, if you're sitting at home and you're not on visits, you can't take a look to see if your proposals are up to date, your portfolio is current. So my team's been a little bit of a bottleneck trying to get through that, but we appreciate it. Need it to keep coming through.
No, that's awesome. And I think, that first week when we all shifted and, just trying to figure out like how to work from home, who's got the kids, like what hours can I be online? Like, we get it. But like, once you start to get the rhythm going, I think it is a good time to build up activity. And this is a really actually fascinating poll. I don't think I've ever seen one split this much. The majority is gone down, but almost as much say, it's gone up. So, I think on a shop-to-shop basis, a lot of it may even depend like when you went to full-time remote work. Evertrue, we shifted 3 weeks ago. Dan, when did you guys go to work from home?
2.5, 3 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah. And then Kansas State, is it 2 weeks ago as of today? Is that right?
Yeah, well, this is, yep, our third week that we're in right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so across the country, it's kind of shifted and gone all over the place, but that's super interesting. Dan, from your expertise working with hundreds of nonprofit organizations across the country, what are things that development and research teams should be doing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I sort of look at like what we're doing here internally at Windfall, and it might just be a little bit of sort of shifting of team resources and sort of being able to do things a little bit more cross-functionally. And I'm seeing some of the same with some of our customers. I'll give you some examples, right? It's probably not a good time to be out there selling or soliciting a gift like in a really aggressive way. So what can you be doing to sort of add value in the interim? And so we're doing things like, our sales team, while they would normally be out there selling, they're actually helping out with writing value add content. A lot of folks from our sales team have fundraising backgrounds, so they're sharing their experiences from the 2008 timeframe, et cetera. There's other things around product development and partnerships. We work with a lot of consultants, and consultants are actually quite active right now trying to basically like retool all of the resources that they can bring to their customers at the end of the day, sort of for when we come out of this. So I think, where we're seeing folks be sort of productive and opportunistic here is, while your sort of day-to-day might be a little bit different, where can you really double down to add value to your constituents, whether it's donors or customers, for when we come out of this, whether it's in, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, or hopefully not longer than that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed it's sooner rather than later, and everybody's healthy and safe and back to it. Julie, what should teams do right now? You're running it all of advancement, prospect development for every organization. What are you doing right now?
Don't stop, right? The worst thing you can do is stop. I think what I've mentioned as far as reaching out, touching base, checking in on people, because we do genuinely care. I mean, we need to know how they're doing. We need to know if there's something we can do to help. And at the same time, bringing them informed of what's going on here. K-State's got a lot of interesting things related to what's going on. And so it's fun as those become publicly available to get to share those and update our insiders with that. And then also to keep on some other progress. So we've already been working on a new way of routing our prospects, working with Windfall. So we are, instead of going right to the front line from my team, we actually work with our digital development officers to send them lists of people who look great. They work to virtually connect with them. So they're first trying to get a hold of them by Facebook, LinkedIn, other ways, and then phone calls and emails if needed. But really help them kind of vet who has an interest in connecting. And then that goes out to our basically our regional team that go out to qualify and then hand our collegiate officers a referral. So we used to meet with our collegiate teams in the colleges and say, here are 10 people that look great. Remember them every time you go to Dallas and Phoenix and LA and New York and Chicago. And an officer might try once or twice and forget about that person. We don't have that problem anymore because our digital development officers are really helping that push. And maybe we're giving them 25 people, but out of those, we give 4 really great referrals as they work through the system out to the front line. So it's been a good opportunity for us to buckle down and really push that through. Hoping to see some great wins there. I know we will. And then we're doing some other exciting things. So we're working with a company on donor personas. We already had 2 tests in place. One is a solicitation.
Just to back up, if I haven't ever created a donor persona before, what is that and what are you doing with that?
Great point. Basically, personas are ways to segment your database around the way people think or act alike. And so ideally, you're going to have between 4 and 8, depending on your group, the size of your database, to say these are the kinds of things that help people get inspired to take action. Not always a gift, but how do they get engaged? How do they find value in what you're talking about? So not down in that interest level, which we could use EverTrue for the help in there and all the tools that they offer, but really big picture, what are those 6 groups of people and how can we act in a way that will engage them and want them to participate with us? So
that makes a lot of sense. That's awesome.
Good. I'm happy to talk more about that with anybody else who has questions offline too on what we're doing. But basically, we're getting ready to do that solicitation and a gift planning newsletter to go out. They both obviously have to be very sensitive and thoughtful. We don't need anything to blow up in our face. But instead of just flat out asking for support, it's got to be a need that they can help fulfill, a reason to connect with us. And maybe it's a way to volunteer or to help in some other way. But we're going to press on with those very, very thoughtfully so that we can begin to see if our personas are correct. Do we see any lift in targeting our messaging to each of those different types?
Awesome. So taking those personas and testing out, a segment of that list with a giving message, with a planned giving message. I like that. Are you doing any kind of warm up to those audiences before the solicitation? Or obviously they're getting a lot of content and they're seeing your posts on social and they're interacting with you, but is there any kind of lead in to those solicitations?
You're right. There's been a ton of just floods of information coming out, right? In all those different outlets, email and social media. We aren't doing a warm-up specific, but a little secret to all the users here, we're going to test on a long-lapsed pool for this solicitation. So it's not exactly nothing to lose, but it's certainly not high stakes to lose. People that haven't donated in 5 years, we're not expecting to see a surge of gifts, but we want to see if there's enough lift in any of those personas that we can tell that there's something to that targeted messaging.
No, I like it. One question here. What was so you're taking Windfall's net worth and you're adding in, engagement insights like Facebook and things like that. And then you're using that to pass to your digital development officers. What was the criteria? Like what's the recipe for finding those folks?
As we all work from home, one of my twins is now up from her nap. So just because of the day and age, we're going to let Evelyn
Good afternoon.
say hi to everybody.
Hi. This is real, folks. This is what life is, and this is awesome. My daughter is running around outside, which is the only way I could keep her from breaking into the office right now.
Thanks. Hopefully my other two are still sleeping. We'll see. So I'm sorry, Mike, you were asking and I've distracted
No, it's
everybody.
okay.
Will you want to repeat that?
No, it's fine. So you're looking at Windfall's net worth and you're sending unassigned prospects to your digital development officers to do just to try to engage those folks and pass hot leads to your major gift and leadership regional teams. What's the recipe you're looking for? Are you looking at a certain threshold in Windfall? Are you looking at Facebook engagement in Evertrue? How are you putting all that together?
Yeah, so what we're doing within Evertrue's platform, we have Windfall merged with it, so it's easy for us to get in and see the net worth. We actually are taking a look to say who has not had a visit or a contact report in the last 6 months. So they're fresh, so to speak, not over inundated with the officers or even our student callers. And then we're pairing that up to say who's engaging with us on Facebook. That's a great start for us, just to say they're already engaging with K-State and then go from there. So we've thrown in a lot of other criteria, hit and miss, just trying new things. But every time we kind of recreate it just to try to get closer to the right pool.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing the recipe. Couple questions on qualifications. I just saw one. I know I saw one. Are you doing qualifications right now? Are your gift officers doing qualifications? Is that appropriate at this time?
We are. We're doing the virtual meetings for qualifications or also phone calls too. Those both work really well. Basically, our criteria for those are to be substantive is it has to read as though it was a visit, right? I have to know that they have, for us at K-State, we have to know if they have the capacity to make a major gift, if they have if K-State's a priority, and if they're philanthropic at all. It's pretty easy to look at a list of people with a high net worth, but if they're not philanthropic, we have a pretty low chance. So we're really trying to figure out those 3 things on every qualification visit, be it phone or virtual meeting for now.
No, it's awesome. And I think I would agree with you that now is still the time to move forward. Like you said earlier, like the worst thing we can do is just stop. you know, because students are depending on us, programs are depending on us, and you know, the institutions that and organizations that we work for and love need advancement now. You know, it sounds cliche, but more than ever. So it's time to keep moving forward. Dan, question for you. The oil industry specifically. So this is a big topic of interest. Talk about it with friends in Stillwater, Oklahoma State yesterday, and then folks down south in Texas last week. And, you know, I know it impacts a lot of major gift activity and Julie's team. You know, oil, energy, what are you seeing there? I know the price per barrel is down.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think it's just important to develop some understanding of likely concentration in different asset classes and perhaps take that into account when approaching folks. So, you know, stock market's down, whatever it is on any day, 20%, but oil might be down 60, 70%. And so having some context around, you know, who the employer is, what that industry actually is for the person, I think it is important just from a sort of qualitative research perspective, because different people that have concentration in different asset classes are going to be, you know, down different amounts. Like the bond market has held up pretty well, right? Because yields are basically zero. So, you know, while that's a little bit tough to ascertain from a qualitative perspective, I think just understanding likely industry exposure is important. I think, you know, one of the other things that, you know, I've seen mutual customers do that have the windfall data within EverTrue is you do have the ability, because we're refreshing those net worth estimates on a monthly basis through the integration, to see folks that have had material changes, right? And so probably a good idea to stay away from those folks that have had material adverse change, and just knowing that some of the implicit calculations that we're making will have some of the effects from those specific asset classes.
Gotcha. I mean, the follow-up question to that, you mentioned that you're refreshing info monthly. You know, how often should monthly in EverTrue, you guys are doing it on a weekly basis. You know, how often should we recheck net worth if about so you talked about, you know, checking back, you know, 6 to 9 months downstream, seeing what happens, you know, as a result of this, but like really how often should we be advising our teams to check net worth and to look at that data before having a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, our whole philosophy at Windfall is that, you know, you can't possibly have too much data, right? And so making that data available in near real time is pretty important for situations like this. You know, I think what we will see is some immediate effect in our net worth estimates from what we're seeing in sort of the stock market and those key asset classes we touched upon. But then again, in some of those more illiquid indicators, that may take another 6 to 9 months. So even if we do have sort of a stock market recovery here in the shorter term, the folks that are, you know, being hit right now with, you know, tough mortgage situations, you might see that come through in their real estate holdings in 6 to 9 months. On the small business side, right, if folks aren't able to secure those SBA loans and, you know, operate in industries that are being hit hard, like restaurants, right, it may take, you know, 6 to 9 months for sort of the effect of those businesses winding up to really impact the personal net worth. So what I would advise and expect is, you know, pay attention now. There's going to be some effect, and then again in, you know, each quarter, I think it is important to check, you know, how those things have changed over time.
Yeah, it's a continually moving target, right? And so that's why it's important to have, you know, access to the freshest information possible. Julie, we have a question from Lamar University. You know, seeing a lot of activity with asks, soft asks from gift officers, shifting from, you know, capital projects to emergency fundraising for student support. Is that your experience as well at K-State? I know last week you released K-State Strong, which is the student support initiative. How are you guys approaching that from a major gift perspective?
Yeah, I think obviously if we're working with somebody and they indicate that their interest is an emergency fund, how do I help students right now in this moment? Then yes, we would redirect to where they want to invest. But at the same time, if they still have an interest in the capital project, the faculty they were going to support, the research, whatever it might have been, then it might be a dual conversation of a major gift investment, maybe from an asset that isn't suffering right now. But also that question of if emergency support comes up, here's K-State Strong, here's how you can support today at a level that you're comfortable with, whether that's an annual level or a major gift level.
Love it. And we talked to Lynn Wester last week, and she said it was kind of offhand, but I think it's worth doubling down on. Like, these student support funds are a great way to think about recurring gifts versus one-off contributions. You know, becoming a sustaining supporter of students at Kansas State or Lamar or at any of these organizations and universities. Got a lot of questions here. Keep sending them in via that Q&A. Great question from Jessica. We're still getting some major gifts from donor-advised funds. Is anyone looking at donor-advised funds as a potential group that may be more stable? Will either of you care to shed insight into donor-advised funds?
I can say we haven't taken a targeted approach for that specific purpose. There is opportunities, obviously, with donor-advised funds, specifically around undesignated beneficiaries. So if someone has money sitting out there and you're not part of the bequest, or it's not going to anybody in particular, that could be an opportunity, but we haven't looked at it in relation to assets with the current situation.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I would say, you know, I don't have any data to back this up, but my thesis would be that I think sort of because of what some would call the denominator effect, where, you know, if your public market portfolio becomes a smaller percentage of your overall asset pie, and that's where sort of a lot of these donor advised funds are investing these assets once they're deferred into these funds, you know, the effect might be amplified in terms of the stock market directly affecting those households' ability to make a donation. So I think early to tell, but just knowing where some of those assets are invested might be a little bit tough.
Yeah, I know donor advised funds are always tough to track, right? And so this is going to get complicated. We got about 10 minutes left, just doing a quick time check. Keep sending questions in. We got a bunch of questions we're going to try to get into, but one thing we thought that might be fun is in the chat. Feel free to share, you know, what projects are you taking on right now? I think, you know, stepping back, this could be a great time to take on a data related project, whether it's bringing in new career information, bringing in net worth into your system, or, you know, how are you reprioritizing? Julie, I mean, you had a completely different plan for April. So a lot of that is shifted. And so we thought it'd be really interesting to ask the audience, like, how are you shifting and what are you reprioritizing right now as we think about, you know, maybe pausing fundraising as normal for a few weeks while the world settles. So I see like database conversion items, portfolio cleanup, a lot of that. So it sounds like we're right on target. Julie, I think this is a great opportunity for prospect development to really be the air traffic control for fundraising. I mean, you are talking to your annual giving, communications, frontline fundraising, research teams. You are like the hub, right, at the center of the organization, and this gives you the chance and your to really like help shape like what you're doing on a, you know, annual fund level all the way up to principal gift level. Thoughts on that?
Absolutely, and obviously it's going to depend on how your organization is structured. But for us, you know, we have the benefit of being a very close collaborative working group. But sometimes it's push, right? We're going to pull the data, we're going to analyze what are people doing and where is their opportunity. We're going to push. Other times we're going to pull it in and just try to understand. We have a setup where I work really closely with all of the leads of our frontline. So I don't have to be a policeman at all, and I never want to be. But that air traffic control is absolutely right. Like, who seems to be missing the boat on something and who's doing it really well. And that way we can share both sometimes directly, but other times through their leads, those opportunities, and that really one-on-one coaching can happen there. But if people don't have the data to know about it or to know what's going right even, then it's really hard to share those opportunities. So we like to be in the know and share.
Yeah, and you're still continuing your coachings, right? Like you meet 3 times a year with your gift officers. Did I have that right?
We meet 8 times a year, but 3
I
of
had
them
that
are
wrong.
individual.
Gotcha. Okay,
One
gotcha,
is 3
gotcha.
times a year.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Which
and
we're
you're still
actually
doing that?
Yeah, this March and April are the individual rounds for the spring. And so my team working really hard on those and trying to figure out how to add value in such an unknown state. Like, here's where your goals are, and we think you're looking good, but we don't know where we'll be. But you know what we've really kept saying is just keep trying, right? We're all human. Our goals are going to be adjusted to reflect great work. So the people who are working really hard are going to get absolutely the credit they deserve for being well prepared, but also for working hard right now too.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you can still be meeting, you can still be hitting those goals. You know, maybe we're still figuring out, you know, what the dollars are going to look like, but activity, 100%, we can go do that. So great suggestions here. I see data cleanup, updating reports, plan giving, prospecting, great time for that. Finding emails. Jeff, finalizing our contract with Evertrue. Welcome aboard. That's awesome. Huge outreach project, staff. Oh yeah, like one-on-one outreach to grads. That's awesome. Making sure that they know that the organization's there for them this time. Building leadership pipeline. This is pipeline. And following up with development officers on referrals that have been sent but not contacted. And then Rob is validating screening results from 2019. Dan, do you have any comment there? If you're validating screening results from a few months ago, how might they approach that differently? No offense, Rob.
Yeah, I think you know, one of the philosophies that we have in sort of how we develop and deliver our product is you know, data goes stale pretty quickly. So you know, of course, you're going to want to verify any new source that you bring in and gain some level of comfort with that when you initially bring it in. But I think hopefully with sort of how we enable the constant flow of wealth screening data into platforms like Evertrue, once you've sort of done that, you know, trust building with the new source, you know, you don't have to go back and verify old results. Instead, you're working with last week's results or, you know, a month ago results versus, you know, looking back into last year.
Yeah, because what happened in 2019 seems so long ago. What happened in February right now, personally, feels seems so long ago. So quick question for you on the call. We're going to keep answering some questions. We're going to share like our last poll. And this is really just a convenience thing. If you are interested, if you do not work with, you know, Windfall and Evertrue yet, and you'd like to see, you know, what we can bring to the table, you can hit the yes button and we'll follow up after. But while we're doing that, Dan, question for you, specific Windfall question. How are you getting portfolio, I think stock portfolio information on a prospect, or are you?
Yeah, good question. That would fall into the category of sort of a non-deterministic or a modeled source, right? You're never going to be able to see the complete summation of all assets less liabilities, which is why we take sort of more of a modeled approach where we're funneling in as many possible indicators of wealth as possible. And then we're sort of fitting that to some frameworks that sources like the Treasury Department and the Fed put together in terms of composition of asset classes at different levels of wealth. Mm-hmm. Of course, every individual household can vary from there, but it's more of sort of a modeled approach to arriving at asset allocation likelihood.
Yeah, so highly accurate modeling to get at that information.
Yeah, accurate inputs, and then you know, of course, modeling is always going to leave some room for error. You know, could never have 100% accuracy, but you know, we try to serve in as many indicators as we can to arrive at the most accurate balance sheet picture as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. Julie, when you're a gift officer asking questions about net worth or capacity, you know, what do you tell them? Like when they ask like how you got that number? Yeah. It's directional. What do you mean by that?
We're going to know we're never going to know everything, every source of income, every asset. every debt that somebody has, and quite honestly, that's not our business to do so, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're looking to find people who are interested in making an investment at, in our case, K-State. So truly, it's, here's a group of people that look like they would have the capability to do that. Why don't you have a conversation with them to find out? We use capacity more on the grand scale, right? To say this is how much we think our annual fundraising could be for K-State, but on an individual scale, it's really up to that officer to go out and find out in person what the person's willing to invest.
Yeah, go out and qualify. What are the qualification questions? What kinds of questions are the regional teams asking on their visits, and how are they transitioning that relationship to a gift officer if it gets there?
We're asking the same question. So it doesn't matter if you're on our regional team or if you're for a college or gift planning or corporate and foundations even. Are they philanthropic? Do they have capacity? And is K-State a priority? Those are the three questions we have to answer. And that handoff really happens based on who travels to that region. Mm-hmm. So if we have, let's say, a College of Arts and Sciences with a lot of fundraisers, in our case, 3 or 4, we might give it to the lead if it's somewhere they all travel, like Manhattan, Kansas. But if it's Phoenix, then we would be able to hand it off to that Phoenix officer, and whoever is the receiving officer works with the regional person to talk to that donor and get that handoff. And sometimes that's a visit, sometimes it's a phone call, sometimes it's an email, but they work donor by donor.
Gotcha. We are right at 4 o'clock. I wanted to point out a couple resources. If you're just interested how Evertrue and Windfall work together, you can see that at evertrue.com/windfall. And then for a little more in-depth read into Arup, who is Windfall's CEO, on the stock market's impact on consumer wealth. You can see that on the excellent Windfall Data blog, medium.com/Windfall Data. We'll put those links into the follow-up as well. Also, you can do a free wealth segmentation report on your database right at go.windfalldata.com/wealth_analytics. I suggest screenshotting, but we're also going to send this out, so you'll have that after the fact as well. So go.windfalldata.com/wealth_analytics. Tomorrow, we're doing a Q&A with Chris Campbell, who leads the advancement services team at Oklahoma State University. Really awesome discussion there. You can see that at evertrue.com/remote. Thank you. Can't say it enough. And then here's our contact information for y'all to follow up. Any final thoughts, closing thoughts, Dan and Julie? Dan, I'll let you give closing thoughts first, and then Julie's going to bring us home.
Yeah, no, thank you everybody for attending. This has been really fun to sort of bring together the perspective from different sides of the ecosystem here. So I know I learned a lot. We're trying to deliver the best in class data that we possibly can through Evertrue to our customers. So if any of you are not yet working with us through the partnership, we'd love to do that. So don't hesitate to reach out, but I really appreciate Mike and Julie for being on this and for having me participate.
No, thank you. Julie, closing thoughts?
Absolutely. Agreed. Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun, and I love all the questions and learning from what other people are doing. Those polls and chats are great. Keep the questions coming in even after the fact. Feel free to reach out to any of us, all of us. We'd love to hear more. And at the end of the day, my final thought is just keep moving. Keep your officers busy. Keep everybody engaged. We're going to get through this together.
Yeah. And the more we talk to each other, the more we do stuff like this, the better off the industry will be, the better off our organizations will be. So thank you both so much for coming, for sharing. There's a couple more questions about personas and your CRM, Julie. I'm going to send those to you directly, and we can respond to Chris and Daryl on that. Folks, thank you so much. Thank you all. Be well, be safe, and we'll see you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.